This is the truth about Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, and you might not like it. Over the course of just a few short days in 2021, every single person in the US learned who this woman was. And then, a few weeks later, every single person in the US learned that she had been found dead. Of course, you already know this story. You remember it because the story of Gabby Petito was probably the most viral missing person / murder case since the invention of the internet, possibly in United States history. It was everywhere. It received tons of coverage on the news and on social media. And yet, beyond all the headlines and the heartbreak, there's a deeper, dare I say, darker story that very few people seem to be talking about. The virality of this case raises a very compelling question. And that question is, why this case? What made this particular tragedy resonate so deeply that it overshadowed almost every single other missing person and murder case? Just as an example of what I'm talking about here, the day after Gabby and Brian were pulled over in Moab, Utah, two campers, Kylan Schultz and Crystal Turner, were both murdered just outside of that very same town, Moab. And yet they didn't receive the same headlines and press as Gabby and Brian did. It was such a similar situation in literally the exact same place at the exact same time that Gabby and Brian were in Moab, and yet crickets. All right, so the elephant in the room here, at least for some of you that are more cynical, is that, I don't know, a lot of people will argue that the only reason Gabby Petito's disappearance and murder became this nationwide sensation is because she was an attractive young white girl. I do think that there's some truth to that theory, but at the same time, I do think that there's a lot more at play here. The contrast between the perfect life that Gabby and Brian portrayed online and their true life and relationship, well, that contrast is so stark and frankly morbidly fascinating that I think the contrast is what played a huge role in the virality of this case. There were tons of photos and videos of Gabby and Brian that the public could consume, speculate about, and of course, judge. The way that Gabby portrayed herself online, well, it just made it easy for people to relate to her, to feel sympathy for her, and of course to disdain anyone who would do her harm. There's a lot of important takeaways from this story, takeaways about relationships and domestic abuse, and there's also a giant takeaway about something else. This takeaway would be about social media, of course. This is a perfect example of the fact that you can't believe that social media is real life. That is the truth about this story. Social media is not real.